The night she humiliated her husband in front of the entire city, she had no idea she was laughing at the man who owned the building. She thought she was choosing success. She didn't know she was rejecting a billionaire, and by the time she found out the truth, it was already too late. Before we dive in, I want to know something real quick. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your country and city in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the world. And if you enjoy intense billionaire betrayal and redemption stories like this, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let me tell you about Lena Carter and the biggest mistake of her life. Lena Carter had always hated being poor. She grew up in a small apartment above a noisy mechanic shop. Her father worked double shifts. Her mother cleaned houses. Every time rich families drove past in shiny black cars, Lena would stop and stare. "I will never live like this," she used to whisper to herself. She was brilliant, determined, relentless. By 27, she had built an impressive resume in finance and corporate strategy. But her biggest dream wasn't just to work anywhere. She wanted to work at Titan Global Holdings, the most powerful investment and tech conglomerate in the country. The company, worth over $50 billion, the company everyone whispered about, the company that almost no one could get into without elite connections. And then there was her husband, Daniel Carter. Quiet, simple, almost invisible. Daniel dressed like a man who didn't care about fashion. He drove an old gray sedan with faded paint. He worked freelance consulting, at least that's what he told her. No flashy watches, no luxury suits, no talk of big deals, just calm eyes and a soft smile. They met 3 years earlier in a coffee shop during a citywide blackout. While everyone panicked, Daniel calmly lit a candle and offered it to her. "You look like someone who hates being in the dark," he had said gently. She had laughed. Back then she thought he was humble, grounded, refreshing. But ambition changes people. The more Lena climbed the corporate ladder, the more Daniel's simplicity started to irritate her. "You don't push yourself," she told him one night. "I push in my own way," he replied calmly. "What does that even mean?" she snapped. Daniel never argued back. He never raised his voice. He just watched her, like he knew something she didn't, and that made her even more frustrated. One evening, Lena burst into their apartment, breathless. "They're hiring!" she shouted. Daniel looked up from his laptop. "Who?" "Titan Global Holdings, Senior Strategy Director position." "This is it. This is everything." Daniel paused. For just a second, barely noticeable, his expression changed. "You really want that job?" he asked. "Really want it?" She laughed. "Daniel, this is the company. If I get in there, my life changes forever." Daniel closed his laptop slowly. "What if your life is already changing?" he said quietly. She rolled her eyes. "Please, this is not one of your mysterious life lesson talks." He studied her face carefully. "Lena, what would you sacrifice to get that position?" "Anything," she replied instantly, and that was the first crack in their marriage. Weeks passed. Lena prepared day and night. She studied Titan's quarterly reports, their acquisitions, their CEO's interviews. She memorized their board members. But there was one thing no one seemed to know: who truly owned Titan Global Holdings. Officially, the company was controlled by a blind trust. No single name appeared in public records. The media speculated about old money families, foreign investors, secret tech moguls. It was a mystery, and Lena was obsessed. Then one afternoon, she received an email, subject line, "Final round interview, Titan Global Holdings." She screamed. Daniel walked in from the kitchen. "You got it?" he asked. "Yes." She ran to him. "This is it. The final interview is at the Titan Tower Gala this Saturday." "The gala?" Daniel's tone shifted. "Yes, it's invitation only. Executives, investors, board members. Daniel, this is my moment." She paused. "They said I can bring a +1. Daniel looked at her. "Do you want me to come?" She hesitated. The truth? No. He didn't fit that world. He wasn't polished enough. He didn't speak like corporate elites. He didn't look like success. "I think it might be better if I go alone," she said carefully. Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand." But his eyes, they darkened. Saturday night arrived. The Titan Tower shimmered like a crystal palace in the heart of the city. Limousines lined the street, flashing cameras, luxury gowns, $1 million smiles. Lena wore a silver dress that cost more than Daniel's car. As she stepped out of the taxi, she whispered to herself, "This is where I belong." Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, CEOs laughing in tailored tuxedos. She moved confidently, introducing herself, shaking hands, dropping impressive facts about market trends. She felt alive, powerful, seen. And then she saw him, Daniel, standing near the grand staircase in a perfectly tailored black suit, speaking calmly with 3 of Titan's top executives. Her heart stopped. What was he doing here? She marched toward him, fury rising in her chest. "Danielle," she hissed, "what are you doing here?" The executives turned toward her. One of them smiled. "You must be Lena Carter." She froze. "Yes, we've heard a lot about you." Daniel looked at her, not embarrassed, not apologetic, just calm. "Lena," he said softly, "we need to talk." Her face burned with humiliation. "This is not funny," she whispered angrily. "You had no right to show up here and embarrass me." The executives exchanged glances. "Embarrass you?" one of them repeated, slowly. Lena turned to Daniel, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You don't belong here." Silence. The music seemed to fade. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "You're right," he said quietly. Then he looked at the executives. "Gentlemen, would you excuse us?" They nodded respectfully. Respectfully! Lena didn't notice that detail. She was too angry. "Daniel, how did you even get in here?" she demanded. He studied her face for a long moment. "Because," he said softly, "this building is technically mine." She laughed, a loud, mocking laugh. "Stop lying." But Daniel didn't smile. He didn't blink. And behind them, at the top of the grand staircase, the chairman of Titan Global Holdings began walking toward them, with security following closely behind, and everyone in the room suddenly watching. The laughter died on Lena's lips when she noticed something strange. No one else was laughing. In fact, the room had gone quiet. The chairman of Titan Global Holdings, a man rarely seen in public, descended the staircase with slow, deliberate steps. Conversations faded. Executives straightened their jackets. Investors turned their full attention toward him. And he wasn't looking at Lena. He was looking at Daniel. When the chairman reached the floor, he didn't offer Lena a handshake. He extended his hand to her husband. "Daniel," he said warmly, We've been waiting for you." Waiting for him. Lena felt her stomach drop. Daniel shook his hand calmly. "Thank you, Mr. Harrington." The chairman smiled. "I believe it's time." Time for what? Lena's heart started racing. She grabbed Daniel's arm. "What is going on?" she whispered sharply. Daniel turned to her, his eyes steady, not angry, not proud, just steady. "I wanted to tell you," he said quietly. "Many times." "Tell me what?" But before he could answer, the chairman stepped toward the microphone at the center of the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice echoing across the crystal hall, "thank you for joining us tonight. As many of you know, Titan Global Holdings has always operated under a private ownership structure." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Lena's pulse pounded in her ears. "For years," the chairman continued, "our majority shareholder chose to remain anonymous. But tonight, he has decided to step forward, publicly." The room grew even stiller. Lena slowly turned her head toward Daniel. "No," she whispered. The chairman raised his hand toward her husband. "It is my honor to introduce the principal owner of Titan Global Holdings, Mr. Daniel Carter." Applause exploded, thunderous, respectful, shocked. Lena couldn't breathe. Daniel? Her Daniel? The man who drove a broken-down sedan? The man who wore simple shirts and made his own coffee every morning? The man she told didn't belong here. Security stepped aside as Daniel walked toward the stage. Every executive in the room nodded to him with deference. Deference. The word echoed in Lena's mind. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was real. Daniel took the microphone. He didn't smile. "I never cared about attention," he began calmly. "That's why I chose to stay invisible. Titan was built through strategic acquisitions and technology patents my father developed 25 years ago. When he passed, I inherited controlling shares." Gasps filled the room. "I kept my name out of the media because I wanted to understand people. I wanted to see how they treated others when they believed there was nothing to gain." Lena felt like the ground beneath her heels had vanished. Her memories began flashing in painful fragments. Her complaints, her insults, her embarrassment over his lack of ambition. "You don't belong here." Her own words repeated in her head like a curse. Daniel's eyes scanned the room, then stopped on her. "And sometimes," he continued, voice steady but heavy, "the people closest to you reveal who they truly are when they think you have nothing." The sentence pierced her like a blade. Was he talking about her? No, he couldn't be. But the way he was looking at her, he was. After the speech, executives surrounded Daniel, congratulating him. Lena stood frozen, her entire marriage replayed in her mind with brutal clarity. The nights she criticized him for not networking, the times she compared him to wealthier men, the day she told him she deserved more. And now she realized he had been giving her something far greater than money. Peace, loyalty, love without ego, and she had despised it. Finally, Daniel made his way back to her. Up close, he looked exactly the same, calm, controlled. But now she saw something else in his posture. Power. "Why?" she whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," he said gently. "No, you didn't." "I asked you what you would sacrifice for Titan," he reminded her. Her throat tightened. "You said anything." Silence hung between them. Tears burned behind her eyes, but pride refused to let them fall. "You lied to me," she said weakly. I protected myself, he replied quietly. There's a difference. The words hit harder than any insult. Around them, people were watching, whispering. The ambitious woman who wanted into Titan, married to the man who owned it. The irony was suffocating. I can explain, Lena said quickly. I didn't know. If I had known. That's the point, Daniel interrupted softly. If you had known, that was the problem. Her love had conditions. Conditions based on status, based on image, based on power. Daniel studied her face as if memorizing it. You didn't love the man, he said gently. You loved the idea of what he could give you. And that's not true, she insisted, but her voice cracked. Was it true? Had she slowly replaced love with ambition? The chairman approached them again. Daniel, the board is ready for you. Daniel nodded. Then he turned back to Lena. There's something else you should know. Her heart pounded. What? The senior strategy director position? He said calmly. It reports directly to me. Her eyes widened. And, she whispered, and I've already made my decision. The air between them froze. Daniel, she breathed. But before he could answer, a tall, confident woman stepped forward. Elegant, sharp, powerful. Mr. Carter, she said, extending her hand. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Daniel shook her hand. Lena, he said quietly, this is Victoria Hale. The name hit Lena like a second blow. Victoria Hale, the candidate everyone feared. The woman with international credentials and elite connections. Victoria turned to Lena with a polite smile. I've heard you were also interviewing for the position, she said smoothly. Also, past tense. Lena looked at Daniel. You chose her? She whispered. Daniel didn't answer immediately. The silence was worse than words. Victoria stood confidently at his side. Executives hovered around them like orbiting planets. Lena suddenly felt like an outsider in the very world she had dreamed of. Daniel, she said softly, desperation creeping in. Please, we're married. His expression shifted. Pain flickered across his eyes for the first time that night. Yes, he said quietly, we are. And somehow, the way he said it made her realize that everything was about to change. We are, Daniel repeated quietly. But this time, there was distance in his voice. Not anger, not revenge. Distance. The kind of distance that appears when someone has already made peace with walking away. Lena's chest tightened. Daniel, please, she whispered. Don't do this here. Victoria stood poised beside him, sensing the shift, but saying nothing. The executives nearby pretended not to listen, though every eye in the ballroom was fixed on them. Daniel looked at Lena carefully. You said you would sacrifice anything, he reminded her. Her throat felt dry. I didn't mean us, but you did, he replied softly. You just didn't realize it. The chairman approached again. Daniel, the board vote is ready. We're announcing the new director in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Lena felt like her entire life was being compressed into 5 ticking minutes. She grabbed Daniel's hand instinctively. He didn't pull away, but he didn't squeeze back either. Tell them, she pleaded quietly. Tell them I deserve the position. Daniel's eyes searched her face. Why do you deserve it? Because I've worked for this. Because I'm qualified. That's not what I asked. Her heart pounded violently. Why do you deserve it? The question wasn't about resumes anymore. It was about character, about loyalty, about love. And for the first time in years, Lena didn't have a confident answer. Daniel stepped slightly aside, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "When we met," he said calmly, "you loved that I was simple. You loved that I wasn't arrogant, that I didn't chase status." She swallowed. "But the moment you thought I was small, you treated me like I was." The words hit harder than any public humiliation ever could. "I was stressed," she whispered. "I was under pressure." "So was I," Daniel replied quietly. "Every day I carried the weight of $50 billion, thousands of employees, global markets, and I came home to you hoping for peace." His voice trembled slightly, just slightly. "And instead, I felt like I was never enough." That broke her. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't know," she cried softly. "You didn't want to know." The honesty was brutal. Across the room, the chairman tapped the microphone again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to announce the new Senior Strategy Director of Titan Global Holdings." The ballroom stilled. Victoria straightened. Lena's breathing became shallow. Daniel stepped forward toward the stage. He paused, then looked back at Lena one last time. There was love in his eyes, but there was also clarity, and clarity is more dangerous than anger. Daniel took the microphone. "For this role," he began, voice steady, "we needed someone with vision, discipline, and integrity." Integrity. The word echoed like a verdict. Victoria stood tall. Lena felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. "After careful consideration," Daniel continued, "the board and I have made our decision." A pause, long enough for hearts to race. "We are appointing—" Silence swallowed the room. "Lena Carter." The ballroom erupted in stunned murmurs. Victoria's expression froze. Lena blinked. She was sure she had misheard. Daniel looked directly at her. "You earned the position," he said firmly. "Your qualifications are undeniable." The room buzzed with confusion. Victoria's jaw tightened, but she forced a diplomatic smile. Daniel continued, "But leadership isn't only about intelligence. It's about growth. And sometimes growth comes from painful truth." He stepped down from the stage and walked toward Lena. The applause was hesitant, curious. Lena felt dizzy. "You chose me?" she whispered. "Yes," Daniel said. Relief flooded her chest, until he added, "As Titan's Senior Strategy Director." Her smile trembled. "And as my wife?" she asked softly. The question hung in the air between them. Daniel's face softened, but not enough. "I gave you the career you wanted," he said gently, "because you deserve it professionally." Her heart began to crack again. "But love," he continued, "can't survive where respect dies." The sentence felt like a blade sliding slowly into her chest. "Daniel," she whispered, "I spent 3 years loving you without conditions," he said quietly. "Tonight showed me yours." Tears streamed down her face openly now. "I can change." "Maybe," he said, "but I can't unfeel what I felt when you said I didn't belong here." The memory burned. She remembered the exact tone of her voice. Sharp, ashamed of him. Ashamed of the man who owned the room. Daniel stepped back slightly. "I'm not firing you," he said calmly. "I'm not humiliating you. I'm not taking away your dream." That was the twist. No revenge. No public destruction. Just dignity. "I'm filing for separation," he said quietly. The word echoed louder than the applause had. Separation, not divorce, but close enough. "You're leaving me?" she breathed. "I'm giving both of us space," he replied. "You need to figure out whether you love a man or his empire." Her knees nearly buckled. Security discreetly cleared space around them as the ballroom resumed its low murmur of conversation. Victoria stepped away gracefully, understanding the shift of power had changed again. Lena stood in the center of everything she had ever wanted: the title, the position, the respect, and she felt completely empty. Daniel leaned closer one last time. "I hope you become extraordinary at Titan," he said sincerely. Then he added, softer, "I just wish you had wanted the man before the empire." He turned and walked away, not as a husband chasing approval, but as a billionaire who finally understood his own worth. Lena stood there alone, newly powerful, newly promoted, and possibly newly abandoned. But what she didn't know was that the hardest part of her story hadn't even begun, because power without love comes at a price, and Titan Global Holdings was about to test her in ways she never imagined. The first morning, Lena walked into Titan Tower as Senior Strategy Director. The glass doors felt heavier than ever before. People stood when she entered the executive conference room. Assistants rushed to hand her files. Board members nodded respectfully. 3 weeks ago, she would have felt victorious. Now, the silence in her penthouse apartment echoed louder than applause ever could. Daniel had moved out quietly. No drama, no public statement, just a short message. "Take care of yourself, Lena." He didn't block her. He didn't attack her reputation. He didn't try to control her position at Titan. He simply stepped back, and somehow that hurt more. At first, Lena buried herself in work. If she couldn't fix her marriage, she would dominate the corporate battlefield. Titan was in the middle of negotiating a massive tech acquisition, a deal worth $8 billion. It was risky, aggressive, exactly the kind of move Lena used to admire. The board was divided. Some wanted speed. Others feared exposure. Daniel remained calm during meetings, professional, distant. He addressed her as Director Carter, not Lena, not his wife. Director Carter. And every time he said it, it reminded her of what she had traded. One late evening, as the city lights flickered outside her office window, Lena reviewed confidential projections again. Something felt wrong. The numbers were too optimistic. Projected returns were inflated. Risk exposure understated. Her instincts, the same instincts that made her ambitious, started whispering. She called in the finance team. After hours of digging, they uncovered the truth. One of Titan's longtime external partners had manipulated key data to push the acquisition forward. If the deal went through, Titan could lose billions. It would damage the company. It would damage Daniel. And it would damage her leadership on her very first major decision. She sat alone in the boardroom at midnight. This was her moment. If she stayed silent and let the deal close, the short-term stock surge would make her look brilliant. If she exposed the truth, the board would face backlash for delaying, and Daniel would know she saved the empire, but not for applause, for integrity. For once, she didn't think about status. She thought about him, about the man who valued character over power. The next morning, Lena walked into the emergency board meeting. "Before we proceed," she said firmly, "we need to pause the acquisition." Murmurs filled the room. Daniel watched her carefully. She laid out the evidence, the manipulation, the inflated projections. The room shifted from resistance to realization. The chairman leaned back slowly. "If this is accurate," he said, "you may have just prevented a catastrophic loss." Daniel said nothing, but his eyes never left her. The board voted unanimously to suspend the deal pending investigation. News of the halted acquisition caused short-term volatility. Media speculation exploded. Critics questioned Titan's stability. Lena stood in front of reporters that afternoon. "This company does not chase headlines," she said clearly. "We protect long-term value, even if that means walking away from big numbers." For the first time, she wasn't speaking to impress anyone. She was speaking from conviction, and somewhere deep inside, something shifted. That evening, as the building emptied, Daniel knocked on her office door. She looked up slowly. No audience, no board, no cameras, just them. "You did the right thing," he said. "I know," she replied softly. A long silence followed. "I almost didn't," she admitted. 3 months ago, I would have pushed it through just to prove myself." He nodded slightly. "But you didn't." "No," she said, "because I finally understood something." He waited. "I was so obsessed with becoming powerful," she continued, voice trembling, "that I forgot who I was becoming." Daniel's expression softened. "You didn't want a rich husband," she whispered. "You wanted a respected man, and I failed to respect you when I thought you were small." The honesty hung heavy between them. "I was afraid," she admitted, "afraid of going back to that little apartment above the mechanic shop, afraid of never being enough." Daniel stepped closer. "You were always enough." The words broke her again, but this time differently, not with shame, with healing. "I don't deserve another chance," she said quietly, "but I want to earn one. Not because you own Titan, not because you're worth billions." She looked him in the eyes. "But because you're the man who stayed, calm, during a blackout and handed me a candle for the first time since the gala." Daniel smiled fully, small, real. "I never needed you to choose the empire," he said softly. "I just needed you to choose me when there was no empire in sight." Tears slid down her cheeks again. "I choose you," she whispered. Silence. Then Daniel exhaled slowly. "Separation doesn't have to become divorce," he said carefully, "but trust rebuilds slowly." "I'll wait," she replied instantly. He studied her face, searching for ambition disguised as love. But all he saw now was humility. Weeks turned into months. They didn't rush. They talked. They attended therapy. They rebuilt something healthier than what they had before. Not a marriage built on image, but one built on truth. Titan stabilized. The exposed partner faced investigation. Investors praised Lena's disciplined leadership, but none of that mattered as much as the night Daniel moved back home quietly, placing his suitcase by the door without announcement. No grand speech, no dramatic music, just two people who finally understood what wealth truly meant. Power can impress the world, but character protects your soul. Lena almost lost a good man chasing a powerful one. She learned the hard way that sometimes the greatest empire you can build is trust. And if you're watching this right now, remember, don't wait until someone stands on a stage to recognize their worth. Value them when they're still standing quietly beside you. Because not everyone who looks poor lacks power, and not everyone who looks powerful has love.